Howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile crafting discussion. And in this video, I'm going to take an entire stash tab of synthesis items, fractured items that drop in memories, and go through and appraise them all. But firstly, I want to talk extensively about what makes what makes fractured items good, and what makes them trash. So that'll allow you to decide. My intention is that by the end of this video, you'll have a pretty good sense as to which ones you can definitely feed straight to the vendor, and which fractured items you should keep for other players who may have some desire to buy them from you. The first thing I want to say, though, is that this is predicated upon a mid to late league economy. So that means that the league is completely flooded with good but not great items. It's also completely flooded with great but not extraordinary items. And really the only serious shortage where demand exceeds supply is on truly extraordinary items. The second key factor about late in the league is that the richer players have literally hundreds of Exalted Orbs worth of wealth. And most of what I'd term middle-class players will have a dozen or more exalts, even if a fair bit of that is tied up in their gear, and or potentially their gear, potentially their value of their map tab, their entire map pool, and also in minor currencies, so things like Jeweler's Orbs, Alteration Orbs that you will acquire a lot of through normal gameplay, but that aren't quite as liquid as Exalted Orbs and Chaos Orbs. Now, these economic facts are not as true in Hardcore. Hardcore, obviously, extraordinary items get deleted every time a character dies, and also there tends to be much more demand for the sort of great but not extraordinary items. There's demand for those throughout the entire league. However, I expect I don't have a big Hardcore audience, partly because I can't imagine Hardcore players enjoy watching me die as often as I do, because I play recklessly, I die often, and that's why my main character in Synthesis League is still level 94, and is currently sitting with less than 5% of an XP bar. So, the summary of that is that demand for extraordinary items is huge, and people have the ability to pay for them. And this is a huge driver in the synthesized and fractured items. This means that people are willing to pay multiple exalts, spend multiple exalts for even as little as a 1 in 20 chance of a tremendous payout, as long as that tremendous payout exceeds, as long as the expected value is there. To give you a concrete example of this, one craft that I was considering, and I haven't attempted to make this as yet, is to try to craft a titanium spirit shield that has the following two implicits. Firstly, plus 30 energy shield, and secondly, while this item is corrupted, you are immune to curses while this item is corrupted. So these two mods together allow you to create an absolutely extraordinary piece of kit. Now, the strategy that I've got for crafting this would require me to source 3 titanium spirit shields of item level. One of them would need to be level 86, and the other 2 could be lower. And these would need to have similar locked mods to each other, and then I would only have a 1 in 6 chance of actually successfully hitting the craft that I desire. So basically, you're looking at needing to buy a very large number of titanium spirit shields. And if we have a quick look at the current market prices for fractured titanium spirit shields, and this comes up from poe.trade, the website trade aggregator, I find this one easier to use for than the Grinding Gear Games provided trade aggregator now when it comes to fractured mods. If we're having a look here, I'm going to set that the item level be 86 and that these have 2 locked mods. And we will see. Oh, why am I looking in standard? Would be no surprise that you can't find any in standard league because they don't exist there. And you'll notice that we're looking here. This Armageddon Duty Titanium Spirit Shield is It's 2 locked mods, and they're both garbage, and it's an Exalt, and it's the cheapest. And then the other ones above that are much, much, much higher. So, you know, 3 Exalts and 5 Exalts. If I was to grab all 3 of those, I would still only have 3 independent 1 in 6 chances of successfully completing my craft, and I would need to then go about doing a whole lot of other manipulation to get them ready as well. So, what I'm saying there is that you can make some big gambles with this system, and those gambles can be rewarded at times. You know, there is a potential for it, but that payoff is only there because there are players in the economy with hundreds and hundreds of Exalts, with you know, 3, 4, 5 mirrors, all sorts of things like that. This doesn't exist early in the league, and so very importantly, if you're watching this video during the early days of the May League event, you will need to adjust a lot of this advice accordingly, because the wealthy will not yet have multiple mirrors, the middle class will not yet have a dozen Exalts. And it is their demand that sets the prices for good items, or for extraordinary items. It is not the demand of the more casual player that has, you know, a level 82 main character in the league and has, you know, 200 Chaos Orbs in wealth to their name. Those players do set the prices of lower value, potentially quite powerful lower value unique items, but they do not set the price for the top stuff. So I want to start by firstly discussing fractured crafting. So this is where you take one of the fractured items and manipulate it as it currently stands. So you're not actually putting it into the synthesizer, you're using Chaos Orbs, you're using essences and other crafting methods in order to transform a fractured item into something that's better. Now this is not generally relevant at this point of the league in most cases. And to give you an example of this, quite early in the league, I was excited to have a drop of a Hubris Circlet that had, if I remember rightly, 41 Fire Resist as a locked mod and 43 Cold Resist as its second locked mod. This was a low item level Hubris, I think it might have been 71 or something like that. But I was quite excited. I thought, oh, I've hit a real jackpot here. You know, someone that's looking to balance their resists and get a bit of energy shield at the same time. This is an excellent item for them to use as it currently is. However, it did not sell. I started it out fairly high priced, and then I quickly dropped it and dropped it and dropped it and dropped it, and I think I still own it. And the reason for this is that people aren't really looking to make ordinary items with the whole fractured and synthesis crafting system. They're looking to make extraordinary ones. And manipulating the fractured items without using the synthesizer, but just with using normal crafting, doesn't generally create anything extraordinary. There is, however, a major exception to this this rule of thumb, and that is jewels. Jewels that have 2 synergistic and powerful locked mods are amazing to chaos spam. So for instance, if you got lucky and had a Searching Eye Jewel drop that had tier 1 added cold damage to bow attacks as a locked mod, and also had plus, let's say, tier 2 life, plus 43 life, as well as the cold damage mod. This is a cold damage to bow attacks. This is an amazing item. This is something that you could then use perhaps 100 Chaos Orbs on, and the end result will be a jewel that in previous leagues would have been many Exalts if it was available at all. So jewels are the exception. If you see a jewel with 2 synergistic and powerful locked mods, you want to be valuing that very highly. You want to think of it in terms of a best case scenario. What is the best 2 mods that could possibly be in the other spot, in the other 2 spots on this jewel, and how many Chaos Orbs is it going to take realistically to roll them? Because if you hit that, you're in the money. So in short, I'm suggesting that you ignore the utility of an item for fractured crafting, because the synthesizer is what drives prices, but jewels are the exception. However, do check the comments on this video, because there may very well be corner cases that I don't know. And also, if you get an extremely rare mod like Merciless or Tyrannical on a weapon, or Runic on a caster weapon, and also non-element chaos damage over time, these are at top tier. These are mods that you might actually be able to sell for their utility in fractured crafting as well. The next point that I want to make before getting into running through the actual trial run and and going through an entire tab of fractured items is just going through how the synthesizer works. Some of you may already know some of this. If you do, I apologize for that, but it does need to be covered for people that don't. Firstly, the synthesizer will pick whether you get 1, 2, or 3 implicits on your final product based upon the number of locked mods that the fractured items that are fed into it have. We don't actually know for certain as a community exactly how this is weighted, but the most commonly accepted hypothesis is that there is a 1 in 3 chance of just taking the number of fractured mods on each of the 3 items. So for instance, if you've got one locked mod on the first item, 1 locked mod on the second item, and 3 on the third item, we currently believe that you have a 2 in 3 chance of ending up with a 1 implicit item, a 1 in 3 chance of ending up with a 3 implicit item, and absolutely no chance of ending up with a 2 implicit item. However, this could be wrong, and there could be weighting in favor of getting the lower numbers. My personal messing around with the synthesizer seems to indicate there might be weighting towards getting less implicits, but I have not done a statistically significant test, and I'm not going to have the time to do that. However, the next 2 parts we are much more certain of. It will take the item level of the highest of the 3 inputted items. So the final product, the synthesized product, will have the item level of the highest of the 3. This is really exploitable in some cases. If you've got, say, if you feed in 3 hubris circlets, one of which is item level 86, one of which is item level 71, and the third of which is item level 69, you will end up with an 86 as your final product. This is extremely useful to keep in mind. It doesn't help you with every craft, and the very popular Onslaught on Boots craft it doesn't help you with, but for most other things it will. Finally, there is the question of the base that you get out at the end. Because you can put in, say, for instance, if your first item in the synthesizer is a set of boots, your other 2 need to be boots as well. The final product seems to be a 1 in 3 chance of being each individual base. So if you put in, say, a hubris circlet, let's go with chest armor. If you put in a dragon scale doublet as your item on the left, a Val Regalia in the middle, and a Necromancer Silks in the right, you just have a 1 in 3 chance of getting each of those types of armor. Dragon scale doublet, a Val Regalia, or a Necromancer Silk. In my experience, it is generally best to focus on putting 3 of the same armor type in there. Oh, I'm using the term armor, I also mean weapons as well. Generally, it will be best to put in 3 of the same base if you're going with something that has energy shield or armor on it. And also probably for weapons as well, it's best to go 3 of the same type. I apologise for that cough. I'm just getting over a nasty cold at the moment, and I still can't stop myself from coughing. Now, the way that the implicit modifiers that you get, once you've determined how many you're going to get, what each one of them is determined from the explicit modifiers. So that is both the locked mods and also the other non-locked mods that are found across all 3 of your input items. So what I mean by that is that if your first item that goes in the synthesizer has fire resist, cold resist, and life, your second item has fire resist, cold resist, and chaos resist, and your third item has just fire resist and life, across those 4 items you have at least 1 instance of fire resist, at least 1 of cold resist, at least 1 of chaos resist, and at least 1 of life. So those four different explicit modifiers are present across your three input items between them. So I term these as mod families. So you've got a mod family, which is your fire resistance. That can be of Tezatosh, the plus 46 to plus 48, or it can be a lower tier like of the Drake, I think it's called. That's the one that's in the 20s. Doesn't actually matter what the specific tier of the mod is, just that family is present. Then for each of those families, there will be one or more possible implicits that are linked to that family. So for instance, and this is where the site that I've got open at the moment, poedb.tw, comes in handy. This site is quite complex to understand how it works, but let's just demonstrate it in practice. We're talking about cold resistances at the moment, and it might help if I can spell resistances. And what we're going to look for here is percentage to cold resistance. This is the specific mod that we're looking for. So this is plus percentage to cold resistance. So this is of Hast or a lower tier thereof. Now you'll notice that depending upon the magnitude, when you basically sum up all of the cold resistances available across the items, that will give you a number that is then compared to this table. For those of you that have an Excel background, this is not too dissimilar to a VLOOKUP, but it's messy in some ways. But the important thing is that if your roll is 140 or lower, you will fall somewhere on this end of the table. So that's a little bit clearer there. So you'll fall somewhere on this end of the table. If it is 0 to 50, 1 to 50 cold resist, you'll wind up with plus 8 cold resist as your possible implicit. That is the implicit that is provided by the cold resist family of stats that you've got. If your cold resist is in the 9 to 10, is in the 51, is less than 75, less than or equal to 75, and does not fall into the first category, you'll then get 9 to 10 cold resist. So that would be 51 to 75. If you miss out on this category because you're over 75, but you're less than or equal to 100, so that means 76 through 100, you'll get 11 to 12 cold resist as the implicit that is added to the family of possible implicits for your cold resist. The tricky part comes up though if you get into the 141 to 150 range, and you'll notice that 141 to 150 is the highest you can get because 48 is the highest that cold resist goes on a single mod. You will then have two possible implicits. One of them, plus 15 to 16 cold resistance, is actually the same as you would get for 126 to 140. Then there's this second special implicit. 7 to 10% of physical damage from hits taken as cold damage. This is a very, very, very powerful effect, potentially anyway. And what will happen if your items add up to 141 to 150 cold resist, you will end up getting both of these as possibilities. So you could get 15 to 16 is added into the pool of possible implicits you can roll, but so also is this this different but generally better modifier, 7 to 10% of physical damage from hits taken as cold damage. So if you're in that block, both of those get added to the pool of possible implicits. So let's say that you have you've gone ahead and you've had the four different families represented: cold resistance, fire resistance, chaos resist, and life, as we were discussing before in our hypothetical. And you've rolled the dice. The synthesizer's determined you're getting two implicits. It's already made that decision. Now, if your goal is to get this mod, and you've got cold resist, fire resist, chaos resist, and life, then you're going to be looking at a 2 in 5 chance because you've got these two mods could roll, plus you'll have at least one fire resist, at least one from chaos resist, and at least one from life that can roll. So all of this means that there's going to be a level of randomness involved in whether you get it or not. And that actually increases demand for fractured items because a lot of crafting attempts fail. So someone that, for instance, is trying to craft this mod may end up being unfortunate and getting this instead. And at that point, they've used up their 3 fractured items. They don't get those back. They wind up with, with a disappointing piece of armor that wasn't exactly what they wanted. And of course, that's a big part of these items being, for them to be as desirable as they are, they do need to be somewhat rare. Once more, I apologize for that damn cough. Hopefully it will go away completely soon. At least I'm getting enough warning to move the mic out of the way now. Okay, so that goes through some of the things that, as to basically how the synthesized crafting works. And definitely, if you're getting into this system in any non-trivial way, you will want to bookmark this page. Now, the main sort of way that people use synthesis crafting is to force one specific implicit that they want. And one of the best tricks for this, I find this to be the best one, is to find 3 two-locked items. So that means, when I say two-locked, I mean that they've got 2 fractured mods on them. And the 2 fractured items are all the same family as each other. So for instance, you've got, let's take fire resistance and cold resistance again. You head over to the trade aggregation websites and you go, okay, what I want is titanium spirit shields with 2 mods. Let's take away the item level requirement because that's not going to be realistic. And what we're looking for is fractured percentage fire resistance. And for the moment, I'm only going to ask for 1. I'm going to do the same with cold resistance, and I'm going to insist that it is fractured. Now, I'll run a quick search on this. I may not get any hits. I've got 2. And I certainly wouldn't be buying either of these at those prices. But you'll notice here, actually, this one's a 3-locked as well. I think I've been too specific insisting on titanium spirit shields. Why don't we just go with shields that have, with any shield, but their armor is a maximum of 0, and their, is a maximum of 1, and their evasion is a maximum of 1. That will mean that they'll be pure energy shield shields. They won't be hybrid. And here we go. Now we've found, now that we've expanded the search to include things like fossilized and thorium spirit shields, we're starting to get hits. This item, and this item would be an example where you've got three items, each of which is 2-locked, and each of which has exactly the same fractured mods. Now, you would then use various crafting methods, and you'll have to sort of work these out on a case-by-case basis when you work out what your actual goals are. But you will want to get the mod that is appropriate to what you're trying. You want to find some way to force onto these items the mod that you care about for your specific craft. So let's say that my goal was to have bleeding cannot be inflicted upon you as a shield mod. Now, that is actually not possible to get on a pure energy shield, but I'll just demonstrate what you would be searching for here. And bleeding cannot be inflicted on you. What you need is percentage chance to avoid being stunned, but it's not 150 is the upper bound. We want the lower bound as well, so avoid being stunned shield. So here we go. Here's the various options. We need at least 56 points of percentage chance to avoid being stunned between the 3 items. So one way that we could force that onto our shields, and let's pretend that these are champion kite shields, not which is a strength and intelligence base, rather than the pure intelligence base, because a pure intelligence base cannot roll this mod. But percentage chance to avoid being stunned, we would then potentially try to force that mod onto each of our 3 fire and cold locked mods, fire and cold locked shields, and we would force that on by using Chaos Orbs, potentially. Chaos Orbs may not be the best way. Sometimes you're going to need to use essences or Del fossils, because you want a mod that is only available through essences. So for instance, Val Regalia, if you want to get the mod gain 1 endurance charge per second if you have been damaged recently, that requires 161 or more strength across your 3 sacrificed items, and you can only get strength on a Val Regalia by using Essences of Rage, which then overwrite the fact that Energy Shield Armor can't normally roll strength. So, with this system, you can use bench crafts, you can use Chaos Orbs, you can use Essences, you can use Fossils in order to get the desired mod onto your 3 two-locked items. And then potentially, depending on how expensive the crafting materials are, you may wish to use annulment orbs to reduce the chance of the synthesizer picking a different family of mods that was put on by your essence. Lots of sort of decisions to make there that really do just come down to basically cost-benefit analysis. In most cases, though, I think it's generally, unless you're trying to craft extraordinarily expensive things, like you're not just using essences, but you're using top-tier fossils like hollow fossils, then in that case, I don't think you're generally going to be using annulment orbs that much. Second way that people craft these is to find 1 locked items that all have the same locked mod. Then use an Orb of Scouring to make the item magic, and then use Regal Orb, or alternately use Orbs of Augmentation, and then once Augmentation and Alteration in order to hit the second desired mod. So let's say that you wanted to craft an item with let's say that you wanted to go with percentage chance to avoid being stunned. You would need to find 3 shields and then use Scouring Orbs and Regal Orbs until, let's say that your shields all have fire resistance. Use Scouring Orbs and Regal Orbs until these all have 2 mods, and the mods are in both cases are chance to avoid being stunned and fire resistance, which is your locked mod, and then you synthesize those. You also need to make sure that you've got enough chance to avoid being stunned. So that is the second way people do their synthesized crafting. Then, however, there is a third way, and this is the one that causes the prices of some fractured items to explode. And in this method, what you do is you look for 3 items that all have the same very high values of 1 locked mod. And I'm going to demonstrate this by looking for one that may even be sold out. This I know will be very expensive if it's even available at all. I'm going to look up rings, and I'm going to look for rings that contain that have at least 1 fractured modifier, which is going to be a given, and that fractured modifier is going to be +2 intelligence. Fractured, not percentage intelligence. No, that's flat intelligence. And we're going, because we're looking for, we're going to need, for the craft that we're looking at, the 3 items are going to have to add up to at least 161. That's almost impossible if the items aren't all in the 53 range. So let's have a search for 53 and higher rings. These have come down in price quite a lot. assuming that these are good faith listings, which I'm not sure they are. You'll notice here that yeah, these are actually way down. In fact, I'm almost tempted to snaffle some of these up and try and craft myself and gain Arcane Surge on hit ring using these. But what we've got here, sorry about that, is rings that have got the specific mod 54 to intelligence with nothing else of consequence. What you do, you get 3 of these, you scour them all so that they become 1 mod magic items, which is what happens after you use a Scouring Orb on a 1 mod fractured item. You will then regal them, and whatever was put on by the regal orb, you then use an annulment orb to get rid of it. Using this method, you can basically, for the price of 3 of these rings, I think this 35 may actually, oh hang on, actually quite a few of these listings are from people who are AFK. I think actually fair market price is probably closer to 90. So if you buy 3 of these for 90 chaos each, and then 90 to 100, and then 3 annulment orbs plus trivial other costs of regals and scours, your attempt at creating an Arcane Surge ring, which is going to be a 50-50 chance to hit, is going to cost you about 2 Exalted Orbs at the current market prices. The reason, or the fact that this is a possibility, is the reason that this specific mod is adding so much value to these rings. Because you have a look, this ring here has basically, although it would be fine on day 1 of a league, it has no utility as an actual item to equip on a character. It is something that is being used solely because players would use it in conjunction with the synthesizer. And having thought about this a bit more, I've just realized why these are cheaper than the rest as well. These are cheaper because they're unset rings, and unset rings have some specific properties with the synthesizer that I won't go into, but they're unfavorable to use. And so going through there, it looks like there's a whole lot of these available with 53, 54, 55 intelligence and a second mod, and at this point you're starting to pay an exalt. The reason for this, as I say, it's all about the utility in crafting rings that have Arcane Surge on hit on them. So, hopefully that gives a sense of what makes items valuable, or what makes fractured items valuable. Some of the demand implications of all of these crafting discussion we've just had. Firstly, Scouring Orbs and Regal Orbs are extraordinarily high priced this league. Regals not so much, although they've had their moments up high, but Scouring Orbs are a chaos at the moment. They have never been a chaos before. They've pretty much always in the past been a little bit less than 1 chaos minus 1 alchemy orb. So, generally that's been the thing that's set their prices. This league, it's Scouring Orbs are the thing that people want. They're using enormous amounts of them in order to do synthesis crafting. Annulment Orbs are similarly high in value. They're at a point now where they're not used as much as they could be, just because at 40 chaos a pop, it's only fairly high-end crafters that are using them. Now, fractured items with the potential to be extraordinary have very high demand. So, if we keep going through demand implications, Scouring and Regal demand is high, Annul demand is high. Fractured items that can be extraordinary, like this here Onslaught Knuckle Diamond Ring, which has no merit to actually equip as an item, but its ability to be used in the synthesizer, it is extremely good. Now, fractured items that don't have obvious potential to be excellent. These have demand. This demand is not zero, it is there. So what you're looking for, the items that are actually extraordinary are the ones that form a combination of a desirable base, that have a desirable item level, that have high tier mods. So for instance, here we're looking at 55 intelligence, which is the highest tier that intelligence can roll. And those high tier mods are the locked mods. We don't really care about the other mods, so this here is the highest tier of mana affix. We don't care about that. We're looking for high tier locked mods, high eye level, and a desirable base. But we don't need all three for items to be good. And you'll find that will happen in when you're looking to buy things. You'll often be fine settling for something like an item level 75 hubris that's got the combination of locked mods you want, or an item level 75 item level 75, even a Val Regalia. I use one of them in crafting my current equipment. Second point is that 2 locked mods are better than 1 in general, especially for the most serious crafters who are chasing 2 perfect implicits, or even who are going further and chasing a 3 implicit item which has 2 perfect implicits and 1 that is just a bonus that's like not overly good but is okay. And you should research the poedb.tw/us/item synthesis mods site for information on what is possible if you're interested in going really deep on this system. Now, the key breakpoints that you need to know. Any item level 86 boots are worth something real with synthesized boots. If you get one of these, put it in a 100 Chaos tab. If it is a set of Sorcerer boots, instead put it in a 3 Exalt tab. The reason these are so expensive is that they are the best way to craft Onslaught boots, and everyone wants Onslaught boots. Not everyone can afford them, but pretty much everyone wants them. When everyone wants something and there's not enough of them out there in the economy to satisfy demand, they become expensive. For Energy Shield armor, the key is actually not so much the item level, but although that helps, the higher the item level the better, it is the type of armor that it is. So Hubris Circlet, Val Regalia, Sorcerer Boots, and Sorcerer Gloves are the best Energy Shield bases. And because Energy Shield benefits enormously from stacking more of it, you will find that there is a considerable increase in price when you can, if you go, for instance, from a Necromancer Silks or an Occultist Vestment up to a Val Regalia, you will see an increase in price. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to log into the game client, and then I will go and do a bit of actual, a little bit of going through and appraising various items that I've collected. I've made it just a 12 by 12 stash tab, it's not a quad tab. And I'm just going to go and identify them and discuss the potential of each item where it's not just an obvious vendor trash item. Okay, so if I recall correctly, it was tab 23, and it was. Okay, so let's just start identifying and see what we've got here. Ornate Mace. We have a low tier mod here. This Reaver's mod is our only locked mod. No one really wants an Ornate Mace anyway. This is vendor trash. For some reason I have a set of Sorcerer Gloves in here that is not synthesized. Anyways, that is straight for the vendor as well. It's Exquisite Lever here. 105 life is a fairly high tier roll. If this is the very start of the league, I would actually think that someone might consider using this item as it currently is, just as it's identified. It's got a lot of evasion, which isn't great, but is something. It's got two good resists and a good life roll. However, at this point in the league, no one really cares about mediocre resists like that. And so for that reason, there's not much potential. Even though that is a tier 3 life roll, I know without looking up POADB that there's not much that you can gain from from synthesis crafting using life as a starting point. So I'm going to be confident in vendoring that. Seventh Robe. This is a high tier of mana roll. I don't think this is particularly good. It's a base that people don't want to use, so I'm going to say again that that's going to the vendor. Even though it's a fairly high tier roll, it's not high enough. Now this is a 2 locked item. My general rule of thumb is that 2 locked items I'm a little bit less inclined to vendor, unless there's a reason for it. I'm going to put this item, I don't see any explosive potential for this item. It's a fairly desirable item level, second best you can get, 85. I'm going to currently price this at 15 chaos. Not expecting it will necessarily sell. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll set this tab to be 15 chaos at the end and move anything else out. But not that I'm expecting it to necessarily sell, but it might get there. This Apocalypse Needle Broadhead Arrow Quiver, it has a second tier critical strike multiplier roll on it, which is okay, but nothing amazing. I don't see that one finding a home as a 1 locked item. Okay, we have you'll notice here the locked item, the locked mod is honed. There's no particularly rare mods on this. Great White Claw, 84. That one can go away. That just doesn't have anything much. This is 2 locked. Again, I'm going to keep the 2 locked mod items. The mods that are locked on are not particularly great, and it does have that high dexterity roll, but that's easy enough to roll anyway, which may be of use for someone for some crafts. But I'm just going to keep that one aside for the moment. Now this is a Titanium Spirit Shield, and it's an item level 83. On that basis, even though it has absolute rubbish as its locked mods, and I'm going to keep this, and I'm only going to ask for 15 on it, because the 6% locked is a really bad roll. If that was higher, I would be considering asking even more than that. At this point, I'll just go and I'll vendor the ones that I consider to be trash, and then get back to the appraisal. It's entirely possible I'm getting some of these wrong too. Some of these may have some value that I'm just not seeing. That will certainly happen from time to time. So let's just grab out a few items, and just to mess with anyone that doesn't like a mess, I'm just going to pay no attention to how it all looks. So we have 2 mods here on this Bronze Tower Shield. Both of them are dumpster tier, and shields in general are not very popular at the moment unless they're ES bases. For that reason, I'm going to drop this. If the mods, instead of Hail, if it had been tier 1 life, or instead of Lobster being tier 1 armor, I would have done some further research. But for the moment, I'm just going to say no. Similar story here. We've got 1 terrible mod that's locked. Nothing going for it. Nothing going for this one either. Again, 1 locked mod. It's not an item level that's inherently precious, so and it's not a base that's particularly great. Here we have something interesting. One of the explicit modifiers is a fairly rare roll of the Gale with increased projectile speed. I need to check this, but I believe that is actually a very strong... That is actually a very, very strong roll on bows. So let me just confirm that I'm right on that. So, quivers and bows. 135 is projectile speed, and 200 is projectile speed or bow attacks fire an additional arrow. Bow attacks firing an additional arrow as an implicit is amazing. And that's 43. 43 is not 1/3 of this number. For that reason, I think I'm actually going to let this... would I consider divining that? I don't think it's quite there. What I'm going to do with this, I think that this bow is not quite sellable, but I'm going to let the market decide. I'm going to stick it in at 15 chaos. It's not extraordinary, but it might just be what someone needs. So for that reason, I'm going to stick it in because it's not rubbish. It might just be perfect for someone's craft. Now, these Chagrin boots are rubbish. And this Ivory Spirit Shield, it's a bad base, or mediocre tier base. No, it's actually bad, this one. But it's got an absolutely top tier roll, stun and block recovery. I'm not sure what that becomes, so I'm going to actually go and look it up. Stun and block recovery on shields. The highest tier roll of this on shields gives you unwavering stance. That's interesting. And that is a monstrously high number. So that means you need to get more than 130% somehow, but this is a perfect roll. This is an interesting one. This would require considerably more research to figure out exactly what is going on here. This will sometimes happen. You will be perplexed as to how you would reach one of these higher tiers. I am going to work on the assumption that someone else has figured that out, and I'm going to leave it in a tab and see if anyone buys it on that basis. Increased damage with poison, it's tier 3, it's not a high tier. We do have the entombing affix, but that is not particularly rare. And we have the Vampire's Affix, which again is not particularly rare. Nothing going for that. That can go away to the vendor. Again, this is not item level 86, and it doesn't have a tier 1 mod on it, so it's gone. This has 2 mods on it, and one of them is of the Genius. This is interesting. From memory, the helmet 161 plus intelligence mod can be +1 maximum power charges. I think this has the potential to be exactly what someone is looking for, and that someone is going to be a crafter with deep pockets. This item is going to start out going in a quite high price tab, and what I'm doing from there, I'm going to see if I can get 75 chaos for it. I actually don't think I will, but I'm not that fussed if I don't, because I can just keep lowering it until it finally finds a home. This here is rubbish, so at this point I can just safely go and vendor all the things that I think have absolutely no prospect of appealing to anyone. I'm also carrying some awful jewels as well that I should probably have vended a while ago. I just want to make sure they're all trash, and they are. So back to the last ones, and we'll appraise all the rest of these and get a sense of where we stand. Generally, I'm not very impressed with weapons, although there are certainly some in circulation that are good. Alright, this is rubbish. This one here, this Crusader plate of the Newt. Yep. So that's a bad lock mod. This one's an interesting one, and actually this is extremely good. Whoa, this is actually alright on its own too. That's interesting. This item has just identified as a good item, which is something that you do not often see at all. I'm not saying it's an extraordinary item, but it is a solid one, just as it was ID'd. The reason that this is really good, you'll notice that it's got a Divine Perfect Locked Frigid mod at the start. I believe from memory that cold damage to attacks on quivers is one of the best mods you can get. So, adds cold damage to attacks on a quiver. 15 to 25% of physical converted to cold. That is extremely, extremely good in the current meta. For that reason, I think that this is the best item I have ID'd today. I don't actually... Yeah, where's the 120 Chaos tab? I'm sure that there's something in here that doesn't belong there, and I'm right. But that is 86, so... Not actually sure. What is an 86 Val Regalia worth these days? With 86... was a Regalia, wasn't it? 86 Val Regalia Elder. This is the PoE.ninja site. If you're not familiar with this, it is a phenomenal resource. Vile Regalia, 86. Elder. That's really not worth much at all. I generally don't assume that that's always correct. There's certainly some people that that manipulate the site in order to get it to read wrongly, but I'm just going to put that away for now. And that frees up the space. Okay, so let's just go through. Firstly, what else have we got here? Rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. And this is 2 locked mods. 2 locked mods items, slink gloves as well. I'm going to keep that on the basis that it's not good, but it may be the exact combination of 2 mods that someone's after. And it also has a couple of obscure high tier mods that are not locked as well. So for that reason, it's going in a 15 chaos. Oh, this will be a 15 chaos tab. These ones go to the vendor. And now we've got some more interesting ones. I'm actually quite excited as to identify. I'm always excited when I identify a jewel, even though they can be trash. Be very disappointing too. So let's start with this. This belt has Resplendent as an energy shield, mod. I need to check what that actually turns out as being on belts. You'll notice that I don't have all of these committed to memory, but I do have a number of them committed to memory. Generally, if I've done a craft before, I will have committed it to memory. Now, more than 130, less than 500 is required. This is more than a third of 130. That makes it quite good because this mod seems to me to be quite strong. 2.2% because you can easily bless it to perfect. Of maximum energy shield regenerated per second while affected by discipline. You're an energy shield character, you're going to be using discipline, so this is a powerful mod. For that reason, I'm going to ask for a high price on this. I'm not sure that I'm right, but one of the best things is that if I'm wrong, it won't sell, and then I can just lower the entire tab at a later stage. Now we have the rings. 33 to fire resistance. This is nothing special. It's a 1 locked ring, and it is only 83. However, rings are a bit rarer. Synthesized rings, fractured rings, sorry, are a bit rarer, and they do have extraordinary potential anyway, just with the Regal Scour crafting method. So for that reason, I'm going to ask 15 for it. This is 2 locked and item level 85. I'm honestly not sure what these go for, so I'm going to look that up in a second. This has a poorly divined, and you can't change that with divine orbs, tier 1 mod, as its only locked mod, and I'm just going to put that in at 15 anyway, just on the off chance that someone wants it. Now, so this here is an 85, is an item level 85 ring. So let's remove that. We are looking for the following. We do not have any concerns about armor and evasion anymore. What we want is, firstly, that there are at least 2 fractured modifiers. And secondly, that the item level is 85. And thirdly, that the item is a ring. I'm just going to do a quick scan to see how much these are going for. And it looks like, oh, they're actually cheaper than I thought they were for 2 locked mods, and there's certainly deep supply. However, I'm still going to ask 15 for it. And the reason for that is that this might just be the exact 2 mods that someone needs to finish a set of 3 rings that they've got, where they've got the same mods on every ring, and then they're using a crafting bench craft for the 3rd one. So for that reason, I'm going to ask 15 chaos because there's very little cost to me in leaving it in this tab for a long period of time. That's trash. Now this is the exciting one. This Hypnotic Eye Jewel is probably going to be rubbish. If the locked mods are bad, then it is bad. However, if the locked mods are good, this is an extraordinary pickup. Oh, Divine Perfect. Damage increase if you have killed recently. That is a powerful mod. Okay, this is valuable. The reason, as I was explaining before when I was talking about jewels, is that once you've got one mod locked in that is a desirable mod and a powerful one, it is just much easier to craft 3 mods via other means than it is to craft 5 other mods on an item. It's not currently there. It's got rainbow damage, so it's got fire, cold, and lightning, and one of them is with a shield, one is with a 2-handed weapon. I didn't actually know that you could get both of those mods at the same time. In fact, I may even think that may even be a bug. But in any case, just from taking that increased damage if you've killed recently mod, that is solid. And I'm thinking that this Hypnotic Eye Jewel, especially if it's in higher item level, yes, it's 84, which is perfect on these. This has a lot of potential. This is something I'm going to use fractured crafting on. Even though I was saying before that I'm not that impressed with fractured crafting generally, this is something that I think might just get there. So for that reason, I'm not going to stick a price on this at the moment. I'm going to try and craft it further. Were I to sell it though, I would probably ask a fairly high price for it. I would stick it in at 2 or 3 exalts, hoping to get a hit. Not confident that I would, but thinking there is a real chance. I've also got this Crimson Jewel that I forgot about. Tier 1 attack speed. Yeah, that's, again, that's something that has a lot of potential. You can see that even though this has just got 3 mods at the moment, that is a very solid roll. I've not seen many people do much in the way of actually synthesizing up their fractured jewels. Most people seem to be using the fractured jewels as things to craft further on. And that's going to be my plans with this one as well. I'm going to hit that with as many Chaos Orbs as it takes to get a good combination of 3 other mods, and then I'll look to sell it for, depending upon the power level that it ends up being, it could be anywhere from 150 Chaos to 5 Exalts, depending upon what it ends up being, and you know, whether I decide to keep rolling it or give up. But having flat attack speed as a locked mod on a jewel is really good as well. So I hope you learnt something from this video and discussion. If you've got any questions, and I'm pretty sure that people probably will, then feel free to ask them below. Otherwise, have a good one.